This is Zen'n'ish.
Welcome to the Zen'n'ish podcast, where we spark insightful conversations about clarity, growth, and mindful living. Today, we're thrilled to have Ms. Shlomit Liz Sanders, LMFT and certified clinical trauma professional, and she's joining us to discuss how we can take charge of our lives by reducing anxiety, managing burnout, and parenting with intention. Shlomit, we're so happy to have you here. Please share a little about yourself, your journey, and what drives your work.
I would be happy to. Thank you so much for having us, for having me today, Dr. Kiki. I am so excited to be here and hope to inspire and motivate some of our listeners today. So as you mentioned, I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I am currently virtual in New York and New Jersey. And really what sparks, I would say, the guiding principles of my practice is really about education and empowerment. Education is just so great in terms of learning more about ourselves, understanding the impact that has had on us as adults, the impact that we have on others, and the empowerment piece is how do we take that knowledge to the next level, and how do we change that? And so I think that that's something I'm so excited about. So the way I got into trauma work is by right out of grad school. I got into the field like everyone else does, working in a mental health agency. I worked with severely mentally ill population. Of course, zero knowledge, zero experience in terms of the actual impact of trauma and how it portrays and displays itself in so many ways. And I was absolutely fascinated by it because it really, it really was just, it showed up in so many ways, mentally, emotionally, physically, physiologically. I mean, we're talking about severely mentally ill patients. And it really impaired their overall day-to-day functioning in so many ways that I just truly didn't understand about as a person right out of grad school, of course.
Yeah.
And so that really took me down the trajectory of, I really want to understand more about it. And so I started to do a deep dive into the world of trauma, which really led me down the path of understanding and learning more about neuroscience. And what fascinated me about neuroscience is really helping me see the different parts of the brain that gets impacted. Memory, creativity, our functioning, our socialization. I mean, we don't even have enough time today to really delve into that element. But and so I really incorporate neuroscience in terms of helping my clients and fellow clinicians that I work with understanding more about their brains, their functioning, and then converting that into empowerment and the steps that they can take.
Wonderful. Awesome. Thank you. Anxiety. Anxiety is something many of us experience daily. How does it reshape our lives, and what can we do to regain control and live with intention?
Such a great question. And there's so many elements there that I think are really important to look at. First and foremost, I would start with this, right? I find that anxiety is one of those perhaps pop psychology words, right, that everybody uses almost interchangeably. And for me, I think it's really important to start with defining what it means. So I think, right, understanding that, first of all, looking at what does it mean if we're feeling stressed or feeling nervous. that is something that every single one of us deals with almost on a daily basis, right? Feeling nervous is really something that gets categorized as a temporary feeling that's often correlated to a direct event, and the nerves tend to disappear after its completion. So, for example, public speaking, going on a first date, a job interview, meeting a new person, taking a test. And then the nerves tend to disappear after the completion of that task or event.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the definition of anxiety is more rooted in intense, excessive, persistent worry and fear about everyday situations that can manifest more mentally and physically or physiologically. And one of the things that therapists look at, right, is as an anxiety in terms of the indicator of an underlying disorder, when feelings really start becoming excessive, all-consuming, and start interfering with daily living. Mm-hmm. And so, first and foremost, I think it's really important to help clarify what it is and what it means, right?
Absolutely.
So, anxiety manifests in so many different ways. One of my favorite ways of explaining this to clients that really I find they identify so greatly with is that anxiety really distorts our reality. Mm. And here's what I mean by that, right? It changes how we see the world. It changes how we feel about ourselves. And so as a result, it can absolutely distort our reality, right? If we take an example of social anxiety, right, which is those excessive fears when it comes to social situations, either in large groups or smaller groups, we will often have a fear of being criticized or judged by others. Mm-hmm. And when we're able to manipulate or extract anxiety out of that, it can become a very real possibility, right? That objective truth about our friends don't care how we, what we wear. Our friends don't care whether we talk too much or don't talk enough or are wearing the latest brands in clothing. Mm-hmm. I mean, the list goes on and on, right? If you apply that to parenting, there's often that underlying fear, right, of not being liked by our kids. And so we tend to give in to our kids more and more. Mm-hmm. And so anxiety really distorts our reality in so many ways. The other way that I find that anxiety can often manifest is by recognizing that it's in part due to not being in alignment with our physical, emotional, and mental selves.
Very true. And I appreciate the delineation that you made there with like nervous and anxious. I think that the word anxiety is used so much now. It's just like, like a buzz phrase within society now. And so it is important for people to step back, take a moment and really think about, am I just nervous? Is this a normal thing to feel right now? Or am I moving over into that realm of, anxiety?
Exactly. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because part of it, I feel like, is for people who struggle with identifying or expressing their emotions, everything often gets lumped into feeling anxious, right? And what ends up happening is that we can very much minimize how we're feeling, right? So if a person says, I'm super anxious about taking this test, I would say, okay, well, that makes sense. But what if it's just, are you prepared enough? Right? Did you study enough?
Right.
Is there an objective reality about being nervous about something that we should feel nervous about, right? And explaining why the physiology is the way it is, rather than just feeling like something is wrong with me for feeling this way and feeling like I have to fix it.
Absolutely. Yes. Great point. I'm going to pivot just a little bit. And I know that you mentioned you work with fellow therapists when, dealing with burnout. And I just wanted to know if you could kind of tell us what are some early signs of burnout and how can therapists or even other professionals begin to address it?
Yeah, such an important question. I mean, as you know, from the rise of the pandemic, therapists have really been overburdened in so many ways, either needing to take more cases, influx of clients, whether they're a private or group practice, schools, agencies. I mean, we saw across the board the impact the pandemic had on so many people, including us as therapists.
Yes.
And so I will say that, one of the early signs or indicators that are worth looking at can include changes in mood, feeling more apathetic about your work or field in general, contemplation to switch fields altogether, having trouble focusing, isolating yourself more, feeling a sense of dread, fear, or intense anxiety about going to work. I would say are some of the pretty big indicators that are worth looking at and just getting in tune and going, okay, what is going on here, right? What is it that I'm feeling or experiencing in this moment?
Yes. Your answer just made me think about just some of the therapist groups that I'm in where, you bounce ideas or kind of support each other. And what I found interesting was it wasn't until maybe 2 or 3 years after the pandemic that I started to see quite a bit of that pop up. Like, what else can we do with this degree? I'm not sure if I really want to continue to see clients one-on-one, that kind of thing. So it seems like it took a moment for it to catch up with many therapists, that feeling.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Right. And in addition to that feeling, right, it's not feeling shame or guilty. Because that is something that I know so many therapists struggle with, right, is feeling guilty, right? We went through so much work, taking out loans, going to grad school, changing our lives, right, and committing to this notion of helping others. And what ended up happening was people might have lost track of themselves, almost in a martyr-like sense of feeling like, I can't worry about myself. I have my clients, I have my agency, I have this, that, or a third. And that guilt or shame can so strongly be associated with wanting to pivot. And I really think that something that's really important to realize is therapists need other therapists, either in a mentorship capacity, supervisory capacity, colleagues. I mean, it's really not meant to be in a vacuum completely on your own. And the other element, this is something I really enjoy doing as I run a workshop, both for mental health agencies or group practices, is I've really created a different paradigm shift at how we look at burnout, right? You mentioned therapist groups, and I'm also part of several, and I've just seen, well, how do you handle self-care? And all these answers are just, oh, I do bubble baths, or I'll take a vacation every 2 years. And I go, ladies, guys, this is not burnout, right? And so I've created a different paradigm shift as far as how do we define burnout? What are some of the core elements that we need to look at that makes this field a sustainable one? So that's something I really enjoy doing, either, in the workshop that I run or working one-on-one with clinicians. And let me tell you, it has been absolutely transformative and life-changing. To start seeing things differently truly changes your life, and it's so empowering.
Absolutely. Yes. you've talked about working with parents and helping them avoid fear-based parenting. Are they going to like me less? Are they going to be angry all the time? Those types of things. Could you explain what that looks like and how parents can shift towards a more intentional approach when working with their children?
Yes. Yeah. This is honestly one of my favorite things to work with as a parent myself. Pre-pandemic, I actually used to work with kids when I was in an office and working with those parents. And now as I work with adults only, one of my favorite things to do, as I say, is how do we lay the foundation, right? By working with the parents, either before they have the kids, right before they have, as they're about to have a kid. How do we set that foundation, right? So let's talk about what that means, right? How do we parent with intention? So first, let me say, most people don't think that they're parenting out of fear. This is not something that is often done on a conscious level, right? And something that I like to bring to parents' attention, again, from an educational piece, is in 20 years from now, how would your kids describe you? Right? What are some of the core elements or memories that your kids have versus what are some of the core memories that you want your kids to have? Were you present with your child? Did you set rules? Were you assertive? Were you afraid of saying no to your child? Did you give your kids responsibilities? Were they part of the house? Were they part of the decision-making process? By the way, they shouldn't be. Spoiler alert, right?
Right.
But starting to shift some of these dynamics. And then when I include looking at how the parents were brought up and raised in some of their own core memories, we start to involve that. And all of a sudden, they start realizing that they are parenting out of fear. They are parenting out of anxiety. And some of that is the fear, right, in the social media day and age, the fear of how they are being perceived by their peers, being perceived by their own parents or family members when they come to visit, right? And so when we take that and we flip it on its head and we go, how do we come to terms with how do you want to parent? How do you want to be remembered as a parent? And working with the parent in terms of instilling that confidence and having them parent out of confidence rather than out of fear, so that it starts to align with the type of parent they actually want to be, not the parent they feel like they have to be.
Yeah. What a powerful piece to have the reflection on their memories of their parents and growing up and that experience. That is a very strong connector for aha moments.
Yeah. I'm going to even give you one more piece to that, which is one of my favorite questions to ask all my clients, no matter what issue they come in with. And this is an exercise that our listeners can even do in this moment is, can you list 3 adjectives that describe your childhood? 3 adjectives that describe your mom, your dad, your relationship with them. And what's very interesting when I ask that question is that neurologically, their brain is sort of shuffling and trying to summarize that in a couple of keywords. Right. And that sort of becomes the narrative in terms of how they think of their parents, think of their upbringing, think of their home, think of their childhood.
Right. I'm sure for some it's like, whoa.
Yes. Yeah. It's absolutely a, oh my bleep bleep moment. Absolutely. Yes.
Wow. That's pretty awesome. Okay. So you've worked with a wide range of clients, from individuals to parents. Can you share a story that really illustrates how living with intention and reducing that anxiety, how it's transformed someone's life?
How much time do we have? I love this question because I am so blessed to have so many examples and clients that successfully graduate our therapy together, which is, as you know, such a blessing and a privilege to be a part of that.
Yeah.
I can think off the top of my head several examples. I have a particular client who has really struggled with essentially being parentified, right? Which meant she didn't really have much guidance growing up. And she took care of her siblings. She was the oldest, which resulted in her having perfectionist tendencies, trouble trusting herself, so much anxiety to the point of it being absolutely debilitating. She's now a mom herself. She is in a very an executive role, if you will, professionally speaking. And when she came to me, she just felt that her life was in absolute disarray. She just felt like she had zero control, that the anxiety just completely dictated when, what, who, when, where, how. She didn't like the way she parented. She found that she parented the way her mom did, which is not something she wanted. Lo and behold, of course, that happened, as it happens to many of us. She took everything personally responsible, right? And that was really due to the intense anxiety that she struggled with. And of course, struggling with the perfectionist tendencies and all the other elements that come with it, she is in such a different headspace. It's incredible. The relationship with her husband is infinitely better. She's no longer defensive with him. She's able to express her needs without guilt, without shame. At work, she's absolutely slaying it. She's making so much more money for her company. I'm sure they're very happy about that.
Yeah.
But what's more important to that, she has really learned how to not feel personally responsible, right? This idea of natural consequences is something that's really important that I address with my clients, which means things will happen the way they will happen, right? So for example, if you have, again, if you're in a managerial or executive role and you have an employee that you are super frustrated about, and you're like, I want this person to really succeed and they're not doing what they should do. And we work on, how do we let go of that, right? We can have a conversation with the person. We can talk to the person. And the natural consequences is there will be natural consequences. Either the person will get fired, whatever it is that ends up happening, right? And as a result, she is now able to do a much better job at not feeling personally responsible if she does have to fire somebody. If her friends don't listen to her verbatim, word for word, right, when she gives out advice. But more importantly than that, she has learned how to reduce anxiety to the point of barely having it. And when it does come up, she has control over it. She can manage it. And the most incredible thing is seeing her parent the way she parents. She actually, get this, she actually enjoys being with her kids now. Which is a fellow parent, let me tell you, is no small feat.
Right. Yes. Oh, that is awesome. That is wonderful. Yes. And it's a very powerful thing, because sometimes the guilt and the anxiety can cripple a person.
Oh my goodness.
And it becomes like it's cyclical. And I know as a therapist, sometimes it's hard to break through it. So, one other thing that I also wanted to mention was in you talking about natural consequences. One thing that I think is so powerful that you stated was that, when it does come up, because anxious nervous feelings, they don't magically just completely go away. But having those tools, and better yet, knowing how to use them in an effective way, is so powerful. And it really gives people, that charge of their life back.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's what's incredible to me, right, is also shifting the language that we use, right? When I get clients and they go, I'm an anxious person. And I go, no, you're not. What are you talking about? Yes, I am. And I go, no, you are a person with anxiety, and the anxiety has taken over.
Absolutely.
Right? But anxiety is not everything about you.
Right.
It's absolutely not. It's a part of who you are. And I think that's really important, to be able to identify and recognize that, yes, there are tools. Yes, your life can look different if and when you are ready for it to look different.
Yes. Awesome. So you have directly mentioned, and a thread throughout this conversation has been the concept of neuroscience with mental health. You often highlight the role of neuroscience in understanding our thoughts and behaviors. And can you tell us how can learning about the brain help people create meaningful change in their lives?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a great question. Learning the role that the brain has in our lives can help explain and clarify things so much, right? I think we get so caught up in the day-to-day, and we end up identifying with the thing that ails us, right? So, for example, I've heard this so many times, as I'm sure you have, of I'm lazy, I'm unmotivated,
Yes.
I'm anxious, I'm depressed, I'm this, I'm that. And when I work with clients in expanding it, I call it zooming out, right? Just like a camera does. And we take a 360 look. And after doing medical clearance, right, I have them do blood work to rule out any hormonal, physiological issues. And we look at their upbringing, and we look at all these different pieces of the puzzle, and we go, well, actually, you are not lazy. You have a deficiency in iron. And that explains why you are fatigued, like chronically fatigued. And they go, what? That's it? I go, well, it's a part of the puzzle, right? But all of a sudden, this view has expanded, right? It's things that they either neglected, didn't think about. They sort of gave themselves this verdict of, I'm a depressed person and there's nothing I can do about it, or I need to go on medications. Again, nothing wrong with that, provided that is what you need. Right. But as I explain to my clients, that is a completely different class of medications than needing a B12 supplement or, iron or whatever it is. Totally different class of medications. Or for men that I work with, right, we look at their testosterone levels, and all of a sudden, everything makes sense, right? What's really interesting, men with low testosterone, the symptoms are actually very similar. They mimic, almost one by one, they mimic depressive symptoms. And that's fascinating, because all of a sudden, everything just shifted in their lives. Right. And they go, well, that's interesting. Maybe I don't have depression after all, right? Maybe the issue was just physiological or hormonal all along. And so that I would say is probably one of the biggest shifts, right? It really changes how you see yourself. It changes how you feel about yourself. And it can really feel liberating, right? It can almost feel like the steps are so much more manageable to having a better life when you understand what it is that's actually going on for you.
Absolutely. And even taking that wider lens, you can kill two birds with one stone. You can elevate your mental health and that physical thing that has been bothering you. And it was like, it was this, all along.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. I remember having a client years ago who presented with very similar symptoms to what I'm describing now, right? Which is, trouble focusing and fatigue. And she was sure that she was just a lazy person because that's the word that she grew up with from her mom. And sure enough, we did the blood work and the medical panel, and it came back with low B12, which, and she was anemic, if I recall correctly, right? Which are two very big indicators. B12, for those who don't know, it really affects your energy, ability to focus. And, I just remember seeing this shift in her about probably 4 to 6 weeks after she started taking the correct supplements. And let me tell you, almost instant difference, right? All of a sudden she perked up. She had life back in her.
Right.
And it was truly because of a B12 deficiency. I mean, it's almost a little laughable, right? In terms of the difference that it makes to take a 360 approach.
That's awesome. So, Shlomit, for listeners who want to explore these topics further or maybe even connect with you, what resources or insights would you recommend?
Yeah, so I think it would really depend on what it is that they are looking for, right? There are so many great books, but it's really just going to depend on what they're looking for. Listeners are absolutely welcome to visit me or through my website. And I would say also, connecting to fellow therapists. Find a group where you are feeling heard, connect with a mentor, invest in yourself. Invest in your well-being, invest in your professional self. There's truly nothing better and more important than that, right? Along with the CEs that all of us have to do.
Right.
It's investing in ourselves in a different way. And so as far as resources, there's so many, but I think that it's going to really depend on what the listener is looking for at this point in their lives.
Okay. Well, Shlomit, thank you for sharing your expertise and empowering us to take charge of our lives with intention and mindfulness. It's so important to, like you said, zoom out and take a bigger look, a bigger scope of what's going on. And I think a lot of times we are surprised at what we see and what we find and how we have defined ourselves. So thank you for this.
Yeah, you're very welcome. It's been my pleasure.
And thank you for joining us on Zen'n'ish podcast. If you found today's episode insightful, don't forget to subscribe and share it with someone you think might enjoy it or benefit.
Zen'n'ish copyrighted podcast and website offer opinions of Dr. Lakeisha Hudson, Dr. Kiki Zen'n'ish LLC, and or guests. Content is for information only, not medical advice. Consult a professional for health concerns. Opinions are personal and do not reflect workplaces. Privacy is a priority. All names may be altered for confidentiality. Not for legal use. No guarantee of accuracy. No doctor-patient relationship established. For errors, email 423.4.doctor.kiki@gmail.com.